Today we were talking about Firebase security rules. We've done Firebase, we've used Firebase, but now we could go a little bit deeper and see what Firebase rules provide us. Firebase rules basically allows us to limit who has access to a document, right? So if I have a document on my Firebase Firestore and I want to limit the read-write access to it, I could introduce Firebase rules to the particular collection. So for example, if we have a use case here, a good use case, as Eric brought up earlier, if you have a blog feed and bloggers are able to delete their blog, you don't want a blogger to accidentally delete somebody else's blog. That wouldn't be good, right? So very similar to our app we have here currently today. In that particular feed, it's a barbecue meetup app. I could accidentally delete somebody else's post like that, very simply, right? We don't want that to happen. So we could use Firebase rules to fix that issue. The structure of Firebase rules, as we've seen before, is very similar to when we go to our Firebase rules section in Firebase Firestore. So if I go to rules here, this is what a Firebase rule looks like. That particular Firebase rules, what does it say? Well, at the top here, you have the version number of the Firebase rules. You have the service that the rules are adhering to. In that case, I'm dealing with Firestore. You also have rules on storage as well. But for the purposes of our lesson, we'll just be dealing with Firestore rules here, but they're very similar. Next, you have the top level database here. Below that, you have documents. In that case, this refers to all documents. And here it says, the rule says allow read. Somebody could read our barbecue items. Allow read and write. Anybody could write to it. Anybody could create an item or add an item to the barbecue meetup app. If request, the request object here is the request coming in. Very similar to our HTTP request that we do to web services. You make a request, so the request goes from the client to Firebase in that case. So the request has this object called auth, and this is coming from authentication with Firebase. So request auth UID, which is the user ID. So make sure that the user ID is not null. In other words, make sure there's an authenticated user. So the only person who has read and write access to this particular document, in that case, all the documents, is somebody who's logged in with credentials, username, password. So going back to our lesson here. So there's read and there's write access, like we saw over here. There's read and there's write access, okay? Below read, there's subheadings here. You could get and you could list access. Below write, you could create, like I could create an item. You could delete an item, so that also has a rule. So I say a rule such that the only person who could create is the person who started a comment or whatever it is. So you could have really fine-grained rules based on who is creating that particular item. In our case here, we could create, we could delete. I could say only allow deletion from the person who created the item. Same thing with update. I could say only allow updates to the person who created the item. So some requests, some simple example requests we've seen this one before. This says request authorization only if the user is logged in. This particular request here says get me the user's ID. This particular request says request resource data. This is new, we haven't seen that. So the request coming up to Firebase or being sent to Firebase, the resource is the information being sent. The data is the dictionary. We've seen data already. Where have we seen data in Firebase, in our Firebase projects? Where have we seen the data object? Or what is the data object?
When we're retrieving the data from...
Yes, so when we're retrieving a snapshot, correct? And when we using our initializer to get that data into our custom type, the data is actually the dictionary of fields or properties of that document. So in that dictionary, access price. So this here says access the price of the resource that was sent up to Firebase. Valid, go ahead.
The price, is that like a property that's part of Firebase or it's
Exactly. The price is a property. So if I have to go to my Firebase here, we have no price here, but I could say dot name, dot person ID, dot person name to access the actual property.
okay.
Very good. Um, Very similar to what we're doing in example 4 here. We're saying request resource data that cohort. So only accept cohort numbers between 4 and 6. This is what this statement is saying. And Firebase rules is written in languages very similar to JavaScript and JSON. So the syntax there is very similar. So that's the language it's written in. It's a mix of language. It's not like one language. It's a mix of languages. So this particular line here would say, get me, well, only allow cohorts between 4 and 6. Well, this pretty much speaks like in Swift because this is very similar to any other programming language. Validate price is a number. Other things you could do, you could validate, like if somebody is sending up data to your Firebase, you could say only allow the price should only be a number. Yes, you could do it in Xcode, which you should, but you could also ensure that what's getting sent up to your Firebase is not corrupted data. So even if you're doing it on the client side, your iOS app or your Android app or your web app, right? It's still best practices to also do it on Firebase as well, as far as like data validation. Because yes, it could be correct on the client, but what if something accidentally went through? You don't want that to be corrupting your Firebase data. Validate name is a string, same here. You could say, is something a number? You could say, is something a string for validation? You could also say, only allow a certain amount of characters because I don't want somebody to create a barbecue item where it's only less than 2 characters, right? I want them to put a longer string as an item name. So you could also put that as a data validation rule in your Firebase. Over here, if somebody is writing a review on an item, you could also say, is the reviewer ID the same as the authenticated user ID, right? Is the person writing that review an authenticated user? And the last example we have here, only allow read if the document is published. This one here specifically says, if the resource data, the published property, as Chelsea brought up, if I have a property called published as one of my fields in Firebase, right? And in that case, it's a string. So if the string is converted to published, allow read. Anybody could read it if it says published. If it doesn't say published, or the reviewer ID is not the person who created it, then don't allow read access, right? Because this would easily be a blog post that's not published, it's in draft mode, so don't allow anybody to read it. So that's a rule here. And as we could see, there's many other rules we could write. There's many ways we could write rules. So this is just a glimpse as into what rules we could write. At the end of this lesson, there's more resources here. I would highly recommend watching the Firebase video here. This video is done by the Firebase. This video here is done by the Firebase team. So I'd highly recommend watching that video as if you want to add more rules in your project. And also the Firebase rules documentation is pretty good as well, this one here. So those are more resources you could delve deeper into rules. But our objective for this particular lesson is just to add some rules to our app. Because right now our app is in a state where, again, I could delete anybody else's post. Let me see somebody else has a duplicate here. I could delete anybody else's post. We don't want that to be happening. So we'll fix that by using Firebase rules. Is there any questions before we continue?
Yeah, Alex, I have a question.
Yep.
So on the top, we have like the below read, there's get and then there's list.
Yep.
What is list? Did you mention that? I didn't.
So list is like if you're doing a query to get a list of items, you could write a rule on that.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
Yep. Yep. But what we'll be dealing with today, I think, is only write access, and we'll just keep read generic. Like if you don't want to go finer down into read, you could just simply say read. Same with write, but if you want to go deeper down, like have an update rule, then you'd have an update allow rule.
So is the list we can is that specifically for like filtering, I guess, in a way? Like
It
filtering.
doesn't exactly filter, it just allows read-write access or data validation. As far as filtering, you have to do that with a query.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Okay, any other questions before we continue on? Let me show you the examples I have here. So this rule number 3 here says nobody cannot read or write. Again, this is just top level write. Nobody cannot write. That includes creating, deleting, updating. Nobody cannot read. That includes getting, listing. So why? Because it says false here. Nobody cannot do anything here. If you try to attempt to do anything, you'll get an error from Xcode. So this is basically my database is locked. Nobody cannot access to it. Next rule here we have, this is the common rule we've been using throughout Firebase lectures and our projects. We're saying allow read write if anybody is authenticated, which is what we have right now. Anybody's authenticated to this app, but that's not enough because right now I could accidentally delete somebody else's post. So it's not okay just to stop here. So we probably need to add more rules based on the items. For example, not anybody could delete. So we would want to go further and expand what write looks like and say, allow delete only if the item person ID is the authenticated user ID. And that's going to prevent anybody that's not the creator of the item to delete it. Next rule, only allow created content. That's what I just spoke about here. So the rule we'll add is very similar to this example, number 5, where it says, allow deletion only if the authenticated user ID is the person, so data is the dictionary, person ID is the field or the property, only allow deletion if the user ID, the person who's logged in, is equal to the person ID. Okay, so that's the rule we'll add to prevent anybody from accidentally deleting somebody else's post. Allow a non-account user to explore the app. We'll also add that as well. Did we observe an explore? There was an explore tab earlier. So the explore tab will allow us to say anybody could read on this particular line here. Anybody could read my barbecue items. For example, if a guest is coming, not necessarily bringing anything, so they could see who's bringing what, but they cannot modify or add any items. So we'll allow them to read, true, allow read true. Anybody could read, doesn't have to be authenticated. But as far as creating, you have to be authenticated. This is probably one of the better examples as far as like the complexity of the rules you could add. So do we have any questions with that particular rule?
Oh, for that particular rule.
No, you could ask another question. That's okay.
No, just like from what I'm observing, if after the if is just true or false, it's just overall nobody, like it's just the over. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So true just says everybody. In that case, allow read to anybody.
Okay.
Very good.
And then it's broken down by collection?
Yes, so what we have here, very good question. So what we have here, the top collection here is the person, well, not top collection. The top collection is the documents itself, like the database itself. But in there, we have the person or the people collection, right? And here you could put in any sort of like wildcard. I could say person, I could say person ID, I could say person document. It's just a variable name, okay? And next here, I'm saying for the people, I'm saying anybody could read or write as long as they're authenticated. But where I'm putting more rules is on the items, because that's what we're dealing with more here for now. We're saying first, allow read if anybody, allow read for anybody. And then next, we're saying allow create only if you're authenticated. And we're going down here to say allow delete only if it's the person who created the item. And we could also do update as well. Like there's more rules you could add to this. I could say allow update, which is the same syntax, the same thing, but just changing allow delete. Just maybe copy paste in this to say allow update. Everybody with me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yep. So if we had an update in our interface, we would say only allow update if the person who's updating is the person who created the item. And we'll also add data validation here to show what data validation looks like. So right now we could probably, let me go to the app. Right now I could go create some item that just has one letter. and it goes to seafood, right over here. But what if I don't want to allow that to happen? I could add that as a validation. I could say only allow the name of the item to be greater than 2 characters. Okay? So this here is some JavaScript syntax. Again, it's a mix of different languages with the rules. But those are the more popular ways to do things with rules. And at the end, our barbecue app will have some of the rules we spoke about. So here we'll have read-write access to people collection only to authenticated users. Then we'll go on to say allow non-authenticated users access to read from the items collection. Then we'll go on to say create access to only authenticated users, and the item name has the, well, what is this? Create access to only authenticated users, and the item name has to be longer than 2 characters. That data validation. And the last one, only allow deletion to the person who created the item. But again, you could have many more there, right? Any edge case or accidents you could foresee in your app and prevent it with rules is great. More rules can be implemented above, such as no delete of a person document. For example, if you have delete account, you only want the person that created the account to delete the account. So you would have a rule on the person here. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
very good. Or only the account creator can delete the document. Rules provide robust security for applications to fully review business logic here and use cases for your Firebase rules. Great. So what we're doing here is a basic further introduction to like what rules could give us. I mean, yes, we could do it in code, but that's not where you want to end, because you could easily have an Android app, a web app. They might have rules, they might not have rules on the client apps, but at the end of the day, all the data is going to Firebase. So at that gate, you want to make sure it's foolproof as possible. All right, very good. Okay, so let's get started with the rules for the Firebase. So Firebase rules. Again, what I'm doing here, what to do after this lesson, you could totally create your own Google plist. I think I put that in the lesson somewhere. Here. So this repo has included a Google plist, which we all have. So we all have access to one Google plist. That's why we could all see the same data file. So however, feel free to create your own Firebase project after this lesson here and download your own Google plist, and you could test security rules. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
All right. So after this lesson, I would do my own Firebase project and do exactly the rules we did so that you have a grasp on the rules there. But for now, just follow along with what I'm doing, because I'm the one that have access to the rules. So I go to my Firebase rules. Well, first go to data here. We're all familiar with the data part of this console.
Quick question, Alex.
Yep.
So if we write a rule to only allow certain users to delete a document, we would still need some sort of conditional from them deleting the thing on the front end, right?
Yeah, we want to do both. You want to do front end and back end, right?
Okay, so I would still go ahead and delete the back end stuff, and then we would need like a conditional or something to.
Your question is towards similar to what we have here. Are you saying if you allow somebody to delete here, should you do it on the app?
Yeah, if you delete there, we'll delete the item there, but
it will also delete
it might not delete it in the back end. I mean, unless you have the rule.
Well, right now it would delete it, right? Let's verify here. So items, I could just, actually I cannot do two screens for now. How can I do this? I could filter, but.
So I'm saying if you set the rule, it's no longer going to delete it.
Yes, it's not gonna
crash
delete
the
it.
app or give them a warning.
You're gonna get missing insufficient credentials or something.
Okay, and then the front end stuff you also handle.
Yes. In our case here, you could say cannot delete, or like in Instagram, for example, if you try to swipe on somebody else's comment, it just doesn't work.
Okay.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
It just
but that doesn't
work, or
mean
it
it's only
types.
on the app. That doesn't mean it's only on the app. On the server, they're also protecting that as well.
Right.
Yeah, you have to do them both places. But at the end of the day, the server should be the place where the robust rules are, because you don't want to accidentally change something on the server.
What do you mean? So that's when you're saying write the Firebase rules and the
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. Because again, relying on the client to do all the work is not the best way to go about it.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay. We could technically write stuff client side in order to stop it from getting deleted on the backend side. Is that?
Yeah, that's what Eric said, right? Eric said, I think in their feed, they wrote code to prevent somebody else from accidentally deleting the creator's post.
Oh, okay. For the share space app?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right. That's okay, but you still best practices to do it on Firebase in rules.
Got it.
Right. Very good. Because again, you're working with a team, maybe the Android developer forgot to do it and launched the app, and accidentally users are deleting things.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I
No,
ask a
that makes
question?
sense. Thank you.
Was that Eric?
So you know how we're gonna block the user that's in Explore from creating content?
Mm-hmm.
If they go into it, do we have to do we need to remove the button as well within the app? If the
You can do it. That's a good point. You can do it. You could write code to say the person is not a user or authenticated user, right? If it's not a current user, just disable the button.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Right, but if we allowed them to go in, would it crash the app? Probably.
It's not gonna crash the app, but they just won't be able to. They'll get an error saying missing insufficient credentials.
Okay.
Which is what will actually it's gonna say. Yeah, it's gonna say insufficient permissions.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That's better. Okay, I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. Like as you said, the better thing would be just to disable the button.
Right.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay. Very, very good. Good questions here. So let's go. So let's go to Firebase rules and deal with the first rule, which is we do not want somebody to accidentally delete somebody else's post. So for now, I could actually write comments here. So I'll say we have two collections. So this is going to be people collection. And we'll have a next set of rules for items collection. Again, everything I'm doing here, you could totally do it again at home. But right now, we're just working on one Firebase plist. So here, where it says match here, this is where you provide a path to your collection. In our case here, we'll say the collection name is people / and the curly brackets here is a wildcard. So here you could provide any variable name. In my case, I will simply say person. I'll just say person ID. And for our items collection, I'll say match / the name of the collection is items. And here I'll just say item ID. Item ID represents the document. And for the rule here, for now, we'll just say allow. What do we say? We'll say allow read. Allow read if true. So anybody could read. So anyone can read items, including non-authenticated users. Okay. So read is fine. Then we'll go to create. Create rule. And here we'll say allow create if. In that case, we'll just make sure they're authenticated. So if request, again, request is the thing coming up. So request.authID, we look at the user's ID. make sure they're authenticated, make sure it's not equal to null, make sure there is a value. Okay, so that's read access. And lastly, we'll look at delete rule for items, create rule for items, and delete rule for items. And delete rule will say allow delete if, what do we want to do here? Well, we want to only allow deletion from the person that created the item. So here we'll say only allow delete if request.authID user ID equal to the resource, the thing that you're trying to change. So resource here is the thing that exists on Firebase. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Right, so resource is the item that exists on Firebase. So resource.data, data here is the dictionary in our case here. And on that dictionary, I could access the property I'm interested in. In that case, it's person ID. This person ID, that needs to exist the same way it's written here. So if person ID, so that's it, right? Request user ID equal to the person ID. That's it. So only allow deletion from the person that created the item. In our case, checking the user ID is equal to the person ID. Okay. And that's it for now. So when you're done editing your rules, you just click publish. And here it says it could take up to a minute to propagate. Propagate means from the change to all the client apps. So it could take a minute or so. So as we're using our app, there's no need to reload Xcode or anything like that. It should just work because this is a rule, this is not Xcode. So I change the rule here, I click publish. And now if I go to delete a minis Uno, let's see what happens. Actually, let me clear my console. Let me clear my console, go back to the app and try to delete a minis project. Delete. It doesn't delete. Right?
You shouldn't be deleting it now.
I'm sorry?
Shouldn't be deleting what I said I was going to bring.
Say that again?
I said you should not be deleting what I said I was going to.
Yes, I should not be deleting a minis projects. Oh, yes, I should not be deleting apps. Let me actually run the app because we should be seeing, oh, am I running on the iPad? That's what it is. Let me run again on the simulator because we should see missing credentials or insufficient credentials in the console as I'm trying to delete somebody else's post. So let's see that in action again. Again, let's see, go back to, actually, let's go to Greg this time. I'm gonna try to delete Greg's water. I'm gonna not bring water, I'm gonna bring something else. And here, I'll see missing insufficient permissions. What about my own item? Did I bring anything? Okay, here, I'm gonna try to delete my own item, and that's gone. Are we able to test that on our end?
Yeah.
Very good. And it works, correct?
Yep.
All right. Everybody, yes? Yes?
Did you have to relaunch the app or?
No, you don't have to relaunch the app at all.
Right.
Because the rules themselves don't have anything to do with Xcode relaunching. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, very good. So creating, anybody can create, that's fine. And let's see what else we want to do here to finish our introduction. We have read write. Anybody could read write to people. Allow non-authenticated users can only read items. Actually, that one we haven't done. That's the explore. And allow create only authenticated users. Okay, the characters one, let's do that one actually. So right now, if I go, we could create an item with 1 character or 2 characters. I could create seafood. Here. Verify that you could do the same before we add a rule for that. Actually, let me see it here. Who's verifying? Let me see who's contributing here. Very good. Chelsea, thank you. So Chelsea was able to create seafood with just SN here. So we want to avoid that from happening in our on our database. Again, you could do it on the client side, but it's not enough. You see how powerful the Firebase rules come. Now, any app, regardless of iOS, Android, or web, same rules, right? So now let's go ahead and prevent this from happening because we could see it happening now. Let's go to add that rule. So create, we have 1 rule right now. You could easily add multiple rules to 1 allow action. For example, I could say, allow create only if the person is authenticated, and I could use a logical operator, and I could compound that statement. So this is exactly what we're going to do here. So create rule for items. I'll say rule 1. Rule 1 is only auth users can create. And rule 2, I'll say only allow items with more than 2 characters. All right, so this one here, I have a semicolon. I could simply say, and resource, actually, request dot resource. So the thing coming up, dot data, dot, what are we after? It's item, right? It's name, sorry. Name dot size is greater than 2. Okay, so what does it say? Let me actually put a new statement here. I think that's fine. It's gonna work okay. So here I'm saying create if only authenticated, and next I'm also saying where the request coming in, the resource for that request, the dictionary or the data, the name property that has to exist as name, so that I want to make sure it's name here, is greater than 2. Any questions about that particular rule?
Could you also stop them from putting, like, from repeating the same item?
Repeating the same item, you'd have to do it. It doesn't do like verify if something exists already. That you could have to do a query for.
Right.
So here, I could click published. And let's see if this works right away. Let me just verify to see if it's name indeed. Yes, it's name. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's go back here and let me try to create some item. All right, so that doesn't work. Try another one. Dessert. That doesn't work either. Dessert, where are you? Dessert here. Right, so same thing. I have an error saying missing or insufficient permissions. Right now, nobody cannot enter into our app anything that's 2 characters or less. Everybody with me? Actually, we did not confirm we could actually add anything else. Grilled salmon, seafood, grilled salmon. Grilled salmon is right here. Great. Awesome. So that's where we are with rules. Any questions about data validation?
Okay, so for this, you didn't even have to, just writing the rules themselves, you didn't even have to handle anything client side.
In code, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought the row were still gonna get deleted, even though the stuff remained in the back end. But I guess because the data is still there.
Yeah, the data
it's
is still
difficult.
there. Yep. So again, you probably want to write more rules before production or whatever. But again, if it's in production, you could always delete it after the fact. Here, in that case, if I do not want this, well, I cannot delete it now because I cannot delete Kelby's stuff. Kelby would have to delete it himself, or I could just do it on Firebase. Does that make sense? Or we could have an administrator that could just delete anything. That's also something you could add to your app. You could have an admin and say, if admin, if user ID, or if user is admin, allow true for everything. And that way you could have an admin app being able to oversee the application. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what's the table view itself doing when you're trying to delete that? Is it reapplying?
Here, it's trying to delete it because we could actually take care of that, like maybe not allow swipe at all. Mr. Juan?
Right.
Right.
But at this point, it's trying to delete it.
It's trying to delete it.
And then what does the table view do exactly?
Well, it doesn't delete the item from Firebase. That's why it's reloaded with the same data.
So it just reloads back again with the same stuff.
Yep, because it's calling the snapshot, and the snapshot said, hey, I cannot change anything. I don't have permissions for that.
Do you still call snapshot.apply when you do this? Like it gets called again?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But we could probably prevent that whole thing from happening here. Let's go to, everybody navigate to the data source. Let's see if we could do this here. Navigate to the data source. Can edit row is this here. That actually does the swipe action. Let us see this here. Everybody's in the data source class?
Yes.
All right, so let us we need Firebase. So import Firebase auth. And here we'll say guard, we don't really need the user. Actually, we do need the user. We'll have to do more work here. Where do I get the item? Actually, let's do it in here. I think that's probably better. Let's do it in the commit editing style. Because here we have the item here. We have the item here. Let's try it here. Let's see if we can do it here. So guard user, go to auth.current user, turn. So here we have the user. Let me do one thing here. Command, let's do private for current item to delete is an item. So we have the user here. It's about to get deleted. We could say if, do we have the item yet? We don't have the item yet. So let's still don't have the item here. We have the item.
Type of the variable you just made is.
It was item.
Thank you.
So here we have the item. So let's see what we have here. So if item dot person ID is not equal to user dot UID, then just return. So that's going to take care of not even trying to delete anything here. So that's on the client side as well. So here, We could say client security rule to prevent accidental deletion from another user. Okay, so here, if the item ID, this item, the one you're trying to delete, if the person who created it, the ID doesn't match the person who's currently logged in, then return. Don't attempt to go to my database at all. Okay, just simply return. So that would be okay for the client as well. But again, you really want to ensure that you're also doing it on Firebase itself, because this is not enough. Because the minute we know how we all do errors and stuff, you want to foolproof people accidentally deleting other people's information, content. So here we have, let's see, what call gets called first? Can edit. Let me just take a look at this real quick. I could probably add one more thing here. Can edit gets called first on all. So that's not gonna know anything yet unless we swipe here. And this gets called. Okay, so that's fine here.
Couldn't you like just in the can edit row, like if the current user doesn't equal, like their ID doesn't equal,
We need the
couldn't
item,
you return false there? Like for the can edit row?
but we need the item, right? Actually,
But
we
I'm
could
saying,
we could get the item.
well, I mean, couldn't you just check to see like if the current user?
No, but
Oh,
we need the item, right?
okay, and then that's where you'll return false.
So we could actually just do this. We could do the item here, get the item. Because remember, we need the item first, and then we could take this code, put up here. So now we have the user, we have the item, then we could return false here. So return, this guy needs to return false. There's no user, there's no reason why the person should be swiping our rows. And here, if I have the item, I would say the same logic that we did here, put up here. So if the just return, again here, you want to return false. And down here, just return true. Build. Okay, so we take care of that 2 places here. That. And now you should not be able to swipe either. Let's see. So Brendan, I can't even swipe. Brendan, where is my items? I could swipe my item and delete it. Are we able to test that?
Still typing.
Okay. So yeah, Kelby, the minute we're able to get the item, we could have done it.
All right, cool. Are we using the item to delete anywhere?
Are we using the item itself?
Well, the variable we created.
We're using it here.
The private var.
Oh, you mean, oh, yeah. No, no, we're not using that. I just put that up there, but we're not using that, sorry.
Okay.
Yep, sorry. You able to test it?
Yep, it works.
Okay, cool. So now the only thing you could swipe is your own thing. Yeah, you cannot swipe anybody else. This is very similar to Instagram, right? You create a comment, you can't swipe anybody's comment unless it's your own comment on a post. So this is the same result we have here. I could swipe mine, clearly, delete it, but I can swipe somebody else's. So that's fully ready there. That's good for production, I think, in my opinion. Any questions before we wrap up here? Are we all able to test it? We cannot swipe somebody else's row, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I need like 1 second though.
No problem. You could see all the code, or you want more space?
This is fine right here.
Okay. I don't think we need. Actually, I don't think we need. Where is it? There's probably some code we could take out. We might be able to just take this out actually, because this is never going to get called. Let me just test this. Not that many lines, but does it really matter? I don't think we need it because we're already preventing it here, so it's not going to do that here. Let me just test this. I'm going to bring the Modelos. Oh, somebody's bringing Heineken already. Okay, so I'll take out my Modelo. And that's also good, but I can't do anything else to anybody's row. So actually just remove those lines of code here, and we don't need this and this, because it's never gonna get here if it returns false here. Cool? And false here. Questions? One, you good?
Yeah, I just finished. I deleted the stuff in the commit. And so now I'm gonna run it, see if it works.
Yeah, you should be good, because we're doing it in the can edit, which actually says to this guy here, you cannot even touch that row. So if it returns false, this is not gonna get called. So we're good. Just to review what we did so far today. We spoke about Firebase rules, and the one rule we implemented, or rules we implemented, was to allow read access. Actually, we did not do the explore, but that's okay. You guys could do that for extra homework and practice. For the explore, I think we have the rule in place already. If we go here, so anybody who clicks on that explore button right now could just see anything, but they cannot create anything. Okay. Actually, we could test it out right now. Let me go to my app. I could sign out. I could just explore. I could do anything here. If I click here and I try to create some, I want to bring, what am I bringing? Strawberry shortcake. Oh, they told me I cannot bring it because I don't have an account. See that? No account detected. You need to be a logged in user to use this feature. I click OK. It exits out of the view. Are we able to test that?
We have to sign out, right? And go
Yeah,
back.
sign out and just click explore. So sign out just takes you here, and just click explore, so you have no email and password. You just explore in the barbecue items.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, but you cannot create anything. Right? You're a guest. You can't do anything. No account. Cool. So we actually implemented that rule as well. So we have this. This is the one rule. I could read, but I cannot create. I have to be an authenticated user to create. Very, very good. Very powerful. Okay, so we have access to the lesson, the objectives. We did it. We configured various rules. We reviewed what rules are. And we have a set of rules here we could look at. And we also have resources which we could go further in. I highly recommend watching the video. It's about 22 minutes or so. If you're working in Firebase, which we all are, it's a good video resource to watch. And also the security rules themselves. Yeah, and just test out what parts of your app you think should have a rule, and add one or add a bunch. And data validation is really good as well. That way, it's like, oh, did we check for is empty? Well, we did, but it's also on the server. So there's no way for us to send like an empty document because it's already saying, hey, make sure the count is greater than 5, 10, whatever it is, or make sure it's between 5 and 10 characters. You could do that as well with a simple and statement. You could also have or, right? If the user is an admin or a manager, allow access. So you could go a lot of places with this. All right. And we have our barbecue app. Where is the host? The host did not make it today. All right. Cool. Awesome.